first of all, these guys are incredibly talented, and I was thinking the last couple of days after I met up with these guys on Friday and started talking about Madeleine's history, and when, she was the co-producer on the show, she was the co-writer, she was the star, and I had a lot of people who said to me, and I don't want to, lessen what Taika or Oscar did in terms of directing those series, but a lot of people said to me, Madeleine could probably direct herself. So being a lowly producer where I pretty much don't do that much, I look at someone like you and go, how do you do that? The other thing about working with Madeleine, she has got all of these things that she wrapped up and did in this show, but she's an incredible collaborator. Because I don't think half the people who worked on the show actually realised how much over everything you actually were. So I'd like you to talk a wee bit about where you started and how you got to this stage, and maybe across all the various things you've done, from theatre to writing, your acting, and moving across all the mediums, plus working in film, now television. It's pretty incredible. So where did you start?
I started out doing school plays and never being cast as the leads in school plays, which I think gave me some sort of real determination to eventually just cast myself as all the leads.
She was a character actress from way back.
Oh yeah, I used to do Kylie Mole impressions for the nuns at my family gatherings. The nuns came to our family gatherings. They were pretty rock and roll. But yeah, and then I sort of I started doing theatre sports, so I was doing that from like when I was 14, and so that kind of gave me that improvisational kind of background. And then it wasn't until I left school and I was going to give my year off. I'm still on my year off from going to university, however many years later, and I just was going to try acting for a bit, and I auditioned for Bear, which was the Tua Fraser play. And
how old were you then?
18. And then with Ian Hughes, my good friend Ian Hughes as well, we ended up touring that show for a number of years. And then the year after that, in 99, I did Number 2, which again was another show that I ended up touring for a long time. So I was sort of in the multi-character zone for a while. It was sort of, I did what, at the time I just thought it was normal. I thought everyone just left school and did a solo show or a monologue play, but now I realise how weird that was and how most people go the other way and then work their way up to something like that.
So you've created, like in Super City 2, you've created these characters, these unique characters. So if you go back to the experience of doing Bear and Number 2, like how can you talk us through how you were involved in the writing of those shows or the creation of the characters? How did that work?
They were probably, I would say, more written than like Super City, obviously. But there was a lot of, with Bear, Tor was a young writer at the time too, so he came with I can't remember, Cass might even know how many, it was something like 30 monologues or something, and so we kind of all whittled them down together and through the rehearsal process, and then did the first season of the play, and then I think a couple of characters even changed. There were some new characters. There was a character from the play Now that came out of an improvisation of an impersonation I was doing of someone at a bus stop, and then that became a character in Bear. So, and then with Number 2, there was sort of like 5 pages of script, and we had 3 weeks to rehearse a play, and so we sort of just sat there, and I would read, we were in a rehearsal space, and I would read the script, and then Tor would go away and write, and then come back, and then we'd all kind of input into what we thought it needed, and I think I had the final script maybe a week before we started, the play opened, and then that has pretty much stayed the same, and I sort of just toured that to the point, and in touring it I sort of rehearsed it, and it became what it was by the end.
So, I mean, it's really fascinating to go through this, because I think every writer's process is so different. And, I'm coming from a film background, the emphasis is like really different, but I mean, it's just really interesting to hear how much of what you've done has been so involved in your experience as an actor and coming out of character. And with Super City, how much of the show has come from you finding the characters and then from there developing storylines, or how does it work for you and informed by that whole kind of approach?
Ideally, it would have been the characters first, and that dictated everything. But sometimes we just didn't have a chance, and we had to come up with storylines before we fully understood the character. But ideally, it would be character first, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think for the second season we didn't have as much time. For the first season we had a lot of development because they weren't sure. You know, we had to kind of come up with the concept and prove that we could do it. And
But yes, like usually with the writing process, Madeleine would have this character and you'd just kind of throw suggestions or questions at her, and then she would answer it as the question, or she'd act out a little scene for me. It was very entertaining.
Tom likes to just talk to me as characters as opposed to, I don't think we actually probably know each other as people.
I don't think we've connected.
No, ever.
I'm just going to do a little intro for Tom. Tom is obviously an incredibly prolific playwright, and who just has done so many plays and just come out year after year, and then people are really amazed when they meet him and go, but he's only 15. So how could he possibly be doing this? So perennially Peter Pan, but Tom did English Lit and then has gone on to do all these plays which have toured all around the world. Has a bit of a following in Greece, which is his, you know... I've actually got a friend who...
I don't understand why.
I've got a friend who's got an island in Greece. It could be a perfect place for you to sort of operate your fan base from.
He probably knows me.
Probably knows your work.
Knows my work, yeah.
So you've come from theatre and you've stepped into television. How different was that? And like how did you guys meet up? And was that a step you were ready for and hungry for, or was it like I got pulled into it and it sort of just took off from there?
Well, I think because I used to love television, I used to love comedy shows like this, and I used to watch them and go, that would be my dream job. And then lo and behold, it kind of became my job. We met just through friends. We met at a party one time, or a dinner party, and she just made me laugh a lot, and we just kind of connected that way, wasn't it? Yeah. And then she's like, yeah.
It was just like dreamy.
Yeah,
so
she was dreamy. We danced a lot. We kind of connected on the dance floor.
Fast friends.
And were you like already thinking of characters? I mean, let's talk about quickly. Because we're going to get into the show number 2 and do some clips. But everybody was probably connected originally with the first show, and you did a pilot with Pasha.
That's
the character Pasha
from series 1, and Georgie, the homeless girl. And
is that what put you across the line in terms of the networks going, yes, we want that show? Was that?
I think that got us development funding to write some episodes.
Yeah.
And then we had to write episodes and then produce a better trailer at the end of that process.
So the very beginning of it was Madeleine came to me. She already had some characters in mind, and we came up with. She already had 4 characters. And then we came up with one throughout the development process. But it was TV3 wanted a show with Madeleine, and she had these characters, and then we just kind of came up with stories with them. That's the basics.
I met Katerina Denava, I can't remember how many years ago, and we met up, and she had seen number 2, and she had always thought there was a possibility of doing something. Using that kind of thing. And I think that might have, that was kind of way back. And then it was Carthew Neal, who produced the show, who kind of kicked me up the arse and made me do it. And then it just so happened that I'd met Tom, and I thought, we really connected on a sense of humour level. Like, what we like to laugh at is often rude and sexual.
That doesn't come across at all.
I like lots of poo jokes, and I'm really trying to get Tom round to poo jokes. But
not sophisticated.
No, there were a couple in this latest season, Tom, and you were part of that. You were part of that. They would turn up in a draft, and I'd be like, Tom, there's a poo joke in here. You realise, right? And I'd be like, yes, I know. He wrote it.
And Tom really likes cunt jokes, doesn't he? I have to say this because this is going on the internet.
But basically, Madeleine had all these characters before we began working on it. So it came character first, didn't it?
Yeah. The first season, definitely.
Yeah.
So then series 2 rocked along, and so what were the expectations for you following series 1?
We had lots of notes. We didn't rate very well, and we were also competing with both the Japanese earthquake and the Christchurch earthquake. That's when we were screened. And then the network came to us with a whole lot of suggestions, and our producer was pushing us really hard to be more marketable and more broad. So we had to be more episodic, which we both agree on, and also more funny and more broader characters, I guess.
I would say like the first season was more like an arty version of. It was more like a dramedy. We really intentionally kind of set out to make something funny, but then be able to pull the carpet from underneath the audience at any given time. And I think we kind of were successful in moments in that season, particularly with the sort of end of the Georgie story, which was really satisfying. And it's definitely what we set out to do. But the second season, we really wanted to make a straight up funnier comedy. We wanted to broaden it, but not lose our, what we get out of it. The kind of edginess and the politics, and so yeah.
And how much did that play into the decision to have completely new characters? And was it difficult to do? Was it easy to let go? And were you worried about audience hanging on to characters, or why was that choice made?
I was worried about it. I don't think Tom was. Tom was like, no, new characters. We
talked a lot about it and how we could involve them some way, or whether they had more story. But we kind of came to the conclusion that we were more excited about these new characters, and that the old characters had kind of nicely completed.
Yeah, and I think because the nature of the first series, which was, kind of a longer story arc, we kind of made sort of bigger stories really, and bigger deals out of these stories. So it was sort of, with something like Georgie, it was really hard for us to think about what situation we might put her in next that would be more epic than that whole storyline, So it's sort of
also true to her character as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we have a look at a clip of one of these new characters from the new show? Okay, Offa. Where did she come from?
Can I just say about that clip is that very few of those lines were actually scripted, and what was happening, the camera was just pointed at Madeleine, and it was like, come up with something. So she had to just kind of come up with something like that, and I was standing behind camera quietly laughing at her.
Where did Offa come from? Well, originally Offa we wrote as she was a lot older. She was like an older, big, grumpy woman. And
with glasses and an afro.
Yeah.
But the seed of Offa was Madeleine ringing up. She was having trouble with her internet, and there was this wonderful woman like Offa, who's very kind of sassy and very straightforward, and she was like troubleshooting what to go through.
So have you checked out your router? What you want to do, ma'am, is just go down to your router and just just check if the lights are on for me. Okay, so it could be the jack. So what we want to do is we want to just check out if it is the jack. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put you on hold, Madeleine, if that's cool. And we're just gonna get Ben from tech support onto you. Okay, ma'am, just wait a second. Like
that was where she came from. And we kind of wanted to do why did we want to do the winds kind of thing, which is Warns in this series?
I think the winds thing was there a bit, was there early, and just the opportunity for kind of having this
so
kind
much
of
satire and well known, it's always in the newspaper.
Yeah, totally, always in the news, totally topical, and just and kind of the office environment as well has its own opportunities for comedy as well. So we just thought it seemed very fertile ground, didn't it?
Very PC meets kind of desperate. These poor people coming in.
And so many un-PC things happening. We kept writing the show, and it's funny. You guys probably experience that when you write things as well. When you're writing things, sometimes you think, oh, this is so fucking ridiculous. This has never happened. And then you'd open the newspaper the next day, and it would have happened or something worse. Yeah. And so that was pretty cool.
And we were talking about it last week. We were saying about how Tom is a workaholic, or Madeleine is. I mean, they're both workaholics actually, but
I'm not really. I try and do as
she
little
is.
It's
as
all
I
a
can.
ruse, guys. It's all a ruse from me too.
Yeah, no, she is actually. I can say that Madeleine would do a probably 2-hour pre-call with prosthetics every day. She was on
3
every
hours
day.
for Ray.
3 hours for Ray, and then would do a full day, and then would be also expected
Working on
to
the script
work
afterwards.
as a collaborator, as a script, after work. So, I mean, it was incredible effort, and I mean, it's just as well you really fit and look after yourself. Because seriously, I went after that show. I don't think there would have been many New Zealand actors that could have maintained that pace for that
And
many
then she'd
number of
probably
weeks.
smash it at the gym for a couple of hours too.
I did hit the gym. I did smash it. I was really inspired by an article I read about Jake Gyllenhaal during The Prince of Persia, and he really worked really hard on that film. And then some of the crew people were like, "And then go to the gym and smash." And I was like, "Fuck yeah, Jake, me and you, bro, all the way."
And
He actually did do that. I did read that, but I did not smash it after the gym. I would fall asleep in our script meetings. Tom would be talking to me. I think that I apologised to you the other day because I think a couple of times he would be talking to me and asking me questions, and I'd be like, I was trying to perfect the nod, falling asleep, being asleep nod, like just trying to make it like I was still listening to him.
And then they'll, yeah, oh yeah.
20 minutes later, and Tom's finished the script, and I was so sorry, babes. I was so tired.
And just anyone thinks that Tom got off lightly. Tom actually pretty much cast the show as well as writing it. This is low budget New Zealand television, and of course he was the sidekick for Offa. And so you're writing the show, you end up acting it in as well. So why did you cast yourself? And was that important for you to be in that cameo, or was that
I think
just
it was.
right? Or
I
did
really
Madeleine
drove
just,
that.
You drove that.
I was
Yep.
determined that Tom be in the show. And originally he was going to be Brenda the transgender, but we decided
We thought
that
it
was
would be too
ridiculous.
confusing, her playing multiple, like different sexes, and then this random person playing a transsexual. So yeah,
Yeah.
transsexual, not transgender.
Oh, sorry.
He was having an operation.
But yeah, that we thought we needed that, but to get away with also to get away with Offa being as harsh as she was, but Brendan turned out perfectly formed.
And just, I mean, this is sort of the other part, the improv and all the rest of it. You've obviously, Tom, you're casting people that you know from your own pool. We also had like non-actors, and we also had people like Ursula Carlson. So how when you're on set, and how much of the script is changing as you're actually shooting because you're riffing off people, or how much do you drive that and control it? Mads, and yeah, both of you really.
Well,
She said me.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to do it. No, you do it. I don't even know.
Usually we'd do the written scene, and then Madeleine would just kind of riff afterwards and come up with a whole lot of funnies. But then sometimes scenes would morph, but usually we got the first take would be of the written
Yeah.
script.
We really did. The process this time was, Kathy was quite hard on us, and because
Kathy's our producer.
he's our producer.
Wonderful
and
man.
He's a great man. He's very handsome. He's got a very beautiful family. He's got very good genes. We should make
And
babies.
Kathy was a Cornish name, just in case you're thinking, Kathy.
It's like Matthew, but with a car. Weirdo. He was really hard on us during the writing process this time. So because we had quite a tumultuous time, didn't we? Because we were also trying to do the Super City. We had the Super City US team working, and then we had the Super City New Zealand team working in tandem, trying to meet deadlines and all sorts of things. So we spent a lot of work on the script, a lot of time on the script, and then kind of came back and regrouped after we came back from the US, and we're like, well, we want this to be better. And then Tom and I had how long did we have till pre-production was supposed to start, which was delayed by a month or something.
As much as it could be. It was very... we were working right up until first day of filming, and even then we were carried on writing throughout the filming as well.
Mm-hmm.
Lunchtime meetings, poor Madeleine, lunchtime meetings, like working on scripts with me.
Yeah, and it was, but it was like in retrospect, it was ball breaking, but it was actually really
Much better. The characters were quite different. Offa was pretty much the same, but the others kind of kept evolving. Mary's very different from what she was maybe 2 weeks out from filming, wasn't she?
Yeah,
The
and
last
she
2
sort of
weeks or
came
10
alive
days.
on the shoot as well. She sort of came into her own once I started playing the character, because we'd sort of developed quite a different character, and then in that last rush where she changed so much, so she kind of came alive as the cameras were rolling. She was like,
yeah, should we check that on? Mary, tell us about Mary.
BTW. Whenever the really rude comments come up, my mum's always like, oh, I come home from somewhere and mum's always like, oh, it's a bit rude tonight, that Tom. And I'm always like, I know, he's so rude. Half of that stuff I'm just riffing at them on the day, trying to make Elroy laugh, who plays my son Gareth, just trying to make him laugh the whole time. Sorry, what was it?
She's kind of like this really outrageously sad character in a way, and I mean, how do you? I mean, your female characters are really interesting because we don't see them very often, and so why do you want to tell? Where does Mary come from, or the inspiration to go out of 4 whole characters? I'm choosing her.
I think it was what we kind of learnt is that for comedy to, like, you can get invested in the characters, but they've got to be resilient. And so Mary is resilient. Like, all these terrible things happen to her, but she just keeps going and keeps bouncing back. And I feel just the general consensus with the network and with everyone, script advisors and everything, if the character is resilient, it works better for comedy, I guess, because you're not so worried about them.
Yeah, I would say that. You're so smart. You're so brainy when you...
Yeah.
I just get lost in your beautiful face. That's
I mean, it is a really interesting question as to why we don't see characters like Mary. Do you have
what's this
female
whole like
well, you know, I mean, it's
she's not. I mean, do you think? I mean,
Madeleine and I've talked about it a lot, especially because when we were writing it, there were a wave of films, including Bridesmaid and Bad Teacher,
Young
and Young Adult, which we love. We love those kind of women, but they just don't. The general public can't handle those kind of women.
It's a bigger.
But Bridesmaids was a huge hit.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of explain that? Like, do we get censored at another
well,
level
it's interesting
that we
with
don't?
Bridesmaid that they kept recutting and keep reshooting scenes just to make the central character more likeable. So the whole, I don't know if everyone's watched it, but the whole making a cupcake scene was something that came later, that they filmed much later, just to make her more domestic and therefore more likeable as a female.
People, and it is like there has been a lot of these female characters in the last few years that aren't likeable, and some people, you know, like I've had conversations with people that just don't like those movies at all because they can't handle that type of woman, which is really strange to me because I find them constantly, like, I find them really, like, you know, I find them to be so recognisable. And also I think what Tom and I like is those kind of those nasty traits in people. We're like, it's kind of exposing those for comedic purpose, you know. So. And
would you, of all your characters in this new show, who is the one that the public has responded or general fans have responded to the most?
Ufa by so much.
And she's like really dislikable.
See what I mean? Just fans there, just fans out there.
Yeah.
Offer fans.
Right.
Talk to you after.
Should we raise hands? Favourite character offer? Oh.
The gay community have really liked, really picked up on Mary, I think.
You've actually got 2 hands, so you could do one for one character and I think one for another. Mary? Oh, yeah, okay.
A little few less.
Ray?
Oh,
not
thank
so
you,
much.
thank you,
there we go.
Yeah,
you.
one. And Levi?
Ray the weirdo.
Oh, yeah, he's going to,
Yeah, Levi gets a bit of love
Ray,
as well.
Ray seems to have quite an audience with the middle-aged woman. I think they find him quite attractive.
I got actually when we were filming one time out at Westfield in North Shore, I was just sitting on a bench and I got chatted up by a bunch of 60-year-old women. And I just went along with it, didn't I? Found it quite flattering.
That's funny because Azim actually was a bit... Because I remember we were doing that show...
You found him a bit... Did you find him a bit...
No, I didn't.
Azim would come into the office?
Well, I could have, but, you know... I mean,
yes, in the first series we had another male.
You had some of the taxi drivers, you had, because we were filming and they came back and they went, oh, these taxi drivers were actually talking to Azim because they thought Azim was a real taxi driver. And it was... I think we've actually incorporated it in there. And they were having... Can you remember that? No?
Yeah, we did that in one of the trailers. Yeah, they were
because you were being in character and riffing around. And
but that was, I mean, that's one of the awesome things about like having And that's something that we kept for both seasons was employing real people, which is a lot to do with having new faces and also having people that knew the kind of
the world
and
so
the
the
first
rugby
season,
players all played rugby bar one person.
I think they were all a team. And they ended up becoming real characters themselves, and we would give them lines, or they would they'd improvise with Levi and would come up with their own stuff, which was just added a kind of layer of realness to the whole thing.
Do you think, like, stylistically, I just remember back to the first show, which was actually quite chaotic for production, because we were literally trying to find things as you guys were moving the whole time. It was like way more seats in the pants. And then this show, a little bit more money, like way more structured. I mean, do you think it's made a difference? Would you prefer one style over another? Like, would you?
We always write for way too many extras and way too many locations, and it's always stressful.
But we cut that down this time, didn't we?
Tried to.
But
we still had. I think
the
first one I had to cast 114 parts, and this one I had to cast 76.
Right. So
we cut it down.
Cut it down a bit.
But I'll just point. Madeleine likes to stay in character as well, and it's quite interesting watching like the crew react to the characters. And in the first one, Azim, she stayed in Azim, and he's a bit suave, and you'll just notice all the costume girls and all the makeup girls kind of blushing and not kind of knowing what to do with themselves.
Because he was very polite as well, and
very charming.
He was very chivalrous.
Yes.
There was a little
Not
rivalry
cavalrous.
between our costume and makeup two girls that by the end of it I was like, guys, come on. Get out of here.
Come on, it's
not
just
real.
me.
Yeah. They were looking for a ring on it, kind of thing. Yeah. Should we have a look at another character?
Yeah, I met a really jock guy who in LA actually, and he was like, he'd just come back from Vegas and he'd just seen Celine Dion as the most unlikely guy that you'd ever think he was like, and he was so serious about it. We would joke
and also
around,
her,
you can't
her
joke about it.
plight and her struggle, because Celine Dion's been through some real hardships, guys.
Yeah. And actually we had a whole episode about Celine Dion, which we ended up changing, and that was like the last little snippet that stayed.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, what we wanted to do too with that rugby world is kind of represent this kind of new changing type of guy, like the fact that these rugby guys, they do all listen to their hype up music is all sometimes like Celine Dion and stuff like that before they're going into these big rugby games, and they're kind
and
of
how
are
they look
becoming
and
more
things,
metro
gelling their
and
hair.
that kind of changing the changing face,
Changing masculinity.
Well, that was kind of how the show was pitched as well. I mean, the whole name, Super City, it's Auckland, isn't it? So, you obviously have a spread. Like, is that part of it, that you're going, it's a satire, obviously, on the city? Or does that influence in how you choose the storylines and the characters, or are you just doing things because you like them?
I think we do them first because we like them, and then they kind of slot into the Auckland satire. Comes down to us liking it, though.
I think it's not even specifically Auckland, really. It's kind of New Zealand. We kind of try and think New Zealand, but obviously we're based here, so it comes out. Yeah.
Okay, should we check in our last clip?
The genesis of Ray was we watched a Louis Theroux documentary about bodybuilding, and there was this section where Louis started following these women, these really muscular ladies, and the men that kind of hung around them, and it was very interesting. We loved them. We both really kind of loved the idea of these guys and their stories.
Yeah, and then we sort of merged it with the idea of the small business owner, because we were like, what can the audience connect with? Yeah. I know what, small business owner. So we kind of merged, we kind of got our way. That's how we got our way, really, kind of broadening him out. And then he ended up being the most weird kind of niche character out of all of them.
He's a really, really weird character. I mean, he just comes up with the most outlandish stuff. I mean, it was one of the scripts I was reading going, wow, where does this stuff come from? Because it's really, really unusual. And his voice, if you call it, like, how much of it was stuff that you have in your head? A really old, pommy kind of...
Well, it's kind of dad, like lots of it's kind of, we called it dad humour, so the jokes are what dads would say. Like, oh, shut up, Dad.
Yeah, Dad. I think that was the driving force in that character for both of us, was just this kind of dad jokes and sort of casual, unintentional racism was also a kind of driving force. You know, those people that kind of say things by accident and they don't really, they don't mean it, but they are kind of, it's kind of there.
And also the number 8 wired, do-it-yourself kind of vibe that the Kiwi battler kind of has as well.
And his wife, Helen, I mean, there was a lot of work to get her on board. So how did that, how important was it? I mean, she would have been very difficult to replace that, and the whole thing of her being a real...
There are 2 women like that in New Zealand, her and one other woman. And I just remember her coming into the office and sitting down and talking with us, and she was so against it. But Kathy was very good at kind of slowly persuading her. And then she was... because she gets so much grief, she just walks down the street and people kind of abuse her. And so she was worried about that kind of thing, but then we kind of spun it that it is about it becoming normal for people. And so if she starts representing herself in the public, it will become normal and people won't care about it so much. That's how we kind of won her over. Hope it's worked.
I don't think she's watched it, but that's, I think, more because she doesn't want to see her acting rather than anything else. She's never done it before, so... And she did an amazing job. Like, she was just like one of those people who, and...
Such a great find. Amazing.
A lot of people... and when she first started too, she was quite sort of... like the first day or something, or half a day, she was kind of froze up, but then I think there must be something inside her that really wants to do it, because she got so good to the point where she'd be like offering stuff, and she really got into being Ray's wife as well. And at the end of the shoot, she wrote me a card, and she had one side to me and one side to Ray, and it was always really weird because I actually didn't hang out with Helen as me until after we finished shooting, like the wrap party, and it was so awkward being around her because she hadn't been hanging, because I sort of stayed in character with Ray as well.
And
just
she would
because
start
it was
3 hours
easier.
before everyone else to get makeup, so by the time Helen arrived, she'd be Ray.
So it was like meeting she was my weekend wife. And it was just really, she had a really sweet way with Ray, and Ray had a really sweet way with her, and it was quite weird at the end. Just kind of, I felt like I should go and sit and make up for 3 hours and just to say bye to her properly.
Oh,
she said she was going to really miss Ray too.
I know, she used to say it to us all the time. She'd be going, "Oh God, I love my Sundays when I catch up with Ray so much."
We auditioned a whole lot of semi-muscular ladies, but no one would have sufficed. We needed to get her or this one other woman. Yeah.
And there was a whole world that surrounded Helen that we also had to film in as well. So we had to get all of those people on board and shoot with them, because we shot a big bodybuilding scene, and there was a lot of real people that were being pulled out of, literally cast on the day.
Yeah.
Like Christian.
That was sort of less difficult because they all really wanted to show their muscles off. So it was not really that hard.
But it's hard for them to peak. They've got to dehydrate themselves. So we had to give them plenty of warning just so that they peak for the day of filming.
And a couple of them got shitty because we hadn't given them enough warning to get their veins up and stuff. And it was the first time a crew had to kind of sit around and wait for them. It's like Hamish, our first, would come back and be like, they're not ready yet, so we're just going to have to chill out for a little while they do some press-ups backstage and put their oil on.
Cool. Hey, I'm going to open it up for questions soon, but I wanted you guys to... We sort of talked about putting on the writers' hats again, and 3 tips for everyone in the room, because I think your experience is so unique, but you have a lot to offer writers. So do you want to be first,
Sure.
Tom? Three tips that you would give to people maybe who are looking to write in TV, and things that have worked for you, and things that you want to share.
I think a big one for me, and it's pretty obvious, but make sure the conflict is on screen when you're doing it. We had kind of some storylines where they were talking about stuff that happened off screen or in the past, but it just doesn't work. You've got to have the drama and the conflict on screen. Does that make sense?
There wasn't 3, there was just one.
One.
My mic off now, now it works. I would say one of my tips would be to not lose sight of what you find funny, because I mean, it's especially in this process, like when you've got network notes and you've got script advisor notes, and then you've got other writers on board, and you've got, I think Tom and I, you go through a little bit of a crisis of like, what do I think anymore, and I think when you're doing something like this, especially, is to kind of try and really keep the center of what you think is good. That's something that I took out of this process, but I won't forget again.
And another kind of a rough plot line that we regularly used was we'd come up with a problem for the character, and then they'll try one unique, unusual way to overcome it, and then that fails, and then they try it again, and they either succeed or they don't. But make sure that their way of overcoming their problems is uniquely theirs and really interesting, if that makes sense.
I don't know. What else do I have to offer? This was the homework that you set us, Leanne, and I haven't done it.
Yeah.
Do you think of another one, Tom?
I can read my writing on this page, so that's why I have to stick with this page, so you can't move off it now. Well, it could be about, one of the things about you guys is collaboration. Do you want to talk about that, maybe?
I could talk about this app that Tom made us get for our computers, which was really helpful, a helpful tip.
It is very helpful tip.
It's called Self-Control, and it's an app.
Download it, and you put all the websites you're not allowed to look at, and you give the time as well. But we would regularly do it in, say, 24 hours, and then we're like, fuck, we can't email each other.
Can't send the scripts, can't do more drafts of the scripts, so... be careful about it. But it is very good, because we tend to get quite distracted too when we're writing, because you think of an idea and you're like, oh, has that been done? And then let's look on YouTube, and then you end up on a YouTube tangent. The internet is a real trap that I'm trying to get myself get my foot out of at the moment. I would say Self-Control app.
More tips.
You had another one.
More tips and tips.
Theatre, what has that given you?
Theatre, I think if people really want to get into writing stuff and writing for television or film, is write theatre and put it on yourself, because you learn so much from it. That's my experience. Because if you fail with a film, you can fail gloriously and you can't get any money to make it again. But with a play, you can do another one again, and hopefully people will forget about it. And only 20 people came to see your failures. So I would highly recommend writing for theatre, and also directing it as well. I also think with writing, it is really good if you do multiple roles. I found it really good to cast, because we were writing scripts, unfortunately, right up until the end. But if I cast someone quite early on, I had that actor in mind so that I could tailor the script to it. We had
Ursula in mind right from the very start, and so that was sort of. We didn't even know whether she had wanted to do it or was gonna be any good at acting. Not that it's just that she's usually stand up and. But she was amazing. She ended up being
another point for people for writing for television. Sorry,
he's on a roll now.
Yeah, just have one point to a scene. Like often we would have kind of two things going on, and you just can't. You don't have time or anything, because the scenes do get cut down. If you've got a minute scene, it's quite unusual. So just have one point to a scene, like this has to resolve or something like that. Don't have two things going on. We really
got quite mathematical on this season and sort of broke it down. And because one of the things about last season, having 5 characters for to try and squash into a commercial half hour, is that you only get 2 minutes or less to tell a story, and so that was one of the reasons why we dropped down to 4 characters this time, and we really did kind of plot out how long we would have per scene and what we could set up in that scene, and then what we could pay off by the end. And so it's quite good to. It feels like it's not creative or something, but it is quite effective, and it's good for sort
time saving.
Time saving, yeah.
Also, if you're writing for a network, sometimes you have to labour the jokes just to make it clear what's going on, or the comedy. This is funny. Don't say this is funny because, but write that, but not in those words.
And I would also say, now we're on a real roll with tips. I would also say to not be afraid to just keep rewriting it and trying to make it better. I think that's a real lesson that we both learned on this season, is that, and at the time I was like, fuck you, Kathy, man. I just want to sleep.
Fuck you, we just want to go to sleep, come on.
Tom would set his clock for like 3 a.m. and start writing, and then send a draft to me at 5.
And and she had to kind of finish it and stuff.
But yeah, I would definitely say just never, I will, personally never be just like satisfied when I think it's done.
Yeah.
Always try and...
Well, we would be, but now in hindsight we're like...
Yeah, because I think the first season we're like, no, this is perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know
What's your problem, TV3? Come on.
What's your problem, man? This is amazing. Can't you see?
Another good thing we did was we had a comedy writer who basically we gave them the script, and they would go through and find any extra jokes that they could have. And sometimes what Madeleine would have is 3 options of a joke. I kind of heard about them doing this on Friends to see what joke worked with the studio audience. But what we would do is have the scene with 3 options, and so Madeleine would just do one after the other, and then sometimes we wouldn't decide until the edit.
Cool. Have we got any questions from the floor?
Yes.
Did you guys go to like a network with your like pilot first and even production company lined up?
The network approached Madeleine and wanting to do some kind of show, and then we had a production company, Carthew's one, Fumes TV, and then he produced the pilot that we took to TV3. So production company, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. $20?
Yeah. I don't know.
Number 2.
It's hard to say actually, because a lot of it is like the dialogue, and then I wouldn't actually know.
The story, none of the stories changed in the shoot. In terms of the lines, I'd say probably a 5th.
Hi, Jackie Brown. How
in
are
the
you?
red.
Jackie Brown of the Jackie Brown of the Jackie Brown Diaries. Yes. Yeah.
We're deciding this tomorrow. Say that again.
Offer gets.
Well, we're
knocked
thinking.
down.
We're thinking about Offa having a mum in prison.
Well, yeah, actually, one of the original
prison.
scripts we did have that as a character, and I always loved that.
Yeah.
I really fought for that.
We had this kind of weird thing where Offa would sometimes be talking to her mum in Tongan.
Her mum's in prison,
and
she was just
prison.
in Tongan and just like harassing you, asking
But then
you
it
to come
became
in.
too confused. Like, who is this woman?
And she'd
Cut
be
her
like,
out.
and then she'd be back with a client. But I don't know why we got rid of that. That was fucking genius.
That
no,
poor
we
child.
are,
If she's a child, that poor child.
I know. I reckon that child is maybe the child that Georgie finds, and it's a prequel. What?
Whoa.
Inception.
Thank you, guys.
No worries.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
out,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.